Thank you so much, gentlemen. Now it's time for the first half of the centerpiece of today's event. May I invite the Elizabeth Adiseshiah awardee, Dr. Vikas Kumar, to deliver the Elizabeth Adiseshiah Memorial Lecture.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I am particularly I am grateful to the Malcolm and Elizabeth Adiseshiah Trust for conferring this year's Elizabeth Adiseshiah award upon me. I will use this opportunity to share the broad outlines of my work and redirect our attention towards non-statistical labor involved in the production of government statistics and the non-statistical roles of government statistics. In particular, I'd like to focus on the Census of India. My interest in this census stems from the fact that it provides some of the most crucial inputs to the calculations which are necessary for the processes which constitute and animate India as a modern secular constitutional democracy and as a developmental state. Now, we know that statistics are mostly used as records of patterns and trends, and that are not accessible to direct human observation and are not interpretable from personal experience of the observers. But we are not going to use statistics as records in this conventional sense. Talal Asad, in a paper in 1994, he notes that political success of statistics in the modernizing world is a fact of considerable anthropological significance and suggests that statistics is something to be analyzed and explained as a cultural feature of contemporary world. The intellectual project identified by Talal Asad is valuable, but we are interested in how the entanglement of statistics with the phenomena it is supposed to describe offers new ways of understanding the phenomena itself. The origin and evolution of modern states are intertwined with statistics that have become integral to their self-imagination and how people imagine them. The entanglement in case of government statistics happens, among other things, because of the involvement of non-statistical labor in the production of statistics and the non-statistical functions of published government statistics. Now, these two bridge the scientific and political sides of statistics and turn statistics into archives which encode far more information and nuance than mere mechanical measurements of pre-specified objects. In fact, it can be argued, at least in social sciences, that statistics of interest to us actually contribute to making the objects they are supposed to measure in the first place. So we will step back from published tables and use their rationale and processes of collection and publication of data as points of departure to reflect on the political economic context. We'll argue that anomalies in the census data are often correlated with deeper political, economic, or social shifts and are also tied to problems in the administrative and other statistical exercises. The delay in completion of census, for instance, the delay in publication of census results, flawed categories of enumeration, sustained and systematic coverage and content errors, and abnormal variations in outliers and residual and non-standard categories can therefore be used to explore the limits to state power and legitimacy and its ability to know and represent its territory and people. Prioritizing engagement with errors is meaningful because it is during the moments of breakdown that the statistical infrastructure and the larger context of data become accessible from the social scientific point of view. See, when I was a child, my parents will not allow me to touch the television. Once the television broke down, and then I was absolutely free to open it up. So for me, moments of breakdown in the statistical series give me an opportunity to explore the inside of statistics. So the Census of India is one of the most important pillars of the constitutional democracy that we have. It has constitutional functions, it has administrative functions, it has statistical functions. Without this, the way we understand contemporary India would be difficult. So now I'll try to ask, has the Census of India from 1951 onwards to 2011, has, has its understanding of itself improved? Have the processes of these census improved? So I begin with asking that has the speed has the speed of completing the exercise improved or not? So Professor Ashish Bose, he used to say that from jet speed we have come to auto rickshaw speed. There has been, most census exercises in India have been completed on time, on the field. But when it comes to publication of the data, there has been a growing delay. You can take any report. Since 1971, there has been an increase in the delay of publication of these reports. Now, this is extremely interesting because between 1961, 71 and 2011, the role of computers in data processing and printing has improved. So you see that as the computerization increases, there is data delay. So those people who want to see computerization or handheld devices as the solution to our census need to look at this graph to see, well, computerization may not be the answer. Computers cannot solve the problems of political processes. That would need a human intervention. So now I'd like to ask a series of questions about this self-learning and self-correction, the ability of the census to self-correct. There has been an increase in the net omission rate of the Census of India between 1971 and 2011. The migrants not classified by duration has almost doubled between 1991 and 2011. Raw returns of mother tongues first decreased and then counterintuitively increased between 2001 and 2011. The projection error has not come down over the years. Now, in addition, the content and coverage errors seem to be increasing in a sense. The population shares of residual and non-standard categories show abnormal changes between two censuses. And then there are coverage and content errors as well, specifically speaking. So I'll just give you an example of residual categories. The population share of people who claim that they belong to a scheduled tribe, but whose tribe cannot be matched with the list of pre-specified tribes, has been increasing. And you see, it has increased across all states between 2001 and 2011. The population share of those who cannot be, who claim to be from scheduled caste, but who cannot be matched to the pre-specified list, has increased across almost every state in India. Now, so let's state counting, content and coverage errors. So this is the true population. Assume that there is a real population. Now, this is the population on the right that you actually measure. This part is the coverage error, and this part is the content error. Now, what you actually observe in the published reports is data which contain coverage as well as content errors. And I'm going to argue that these errors are not, it is increasingly the case that these errors are not being explained. I am, showing here on the screen a few coverage errors. I'm focusing mostly on states which I've worked on, but there might be errors in data other states as well. And you see that, whether it is Hindu majority Manipur, Christian majority Nagaland, Muslim majority Kashmir, on two different sides of India, and they have sustained coverage errors at one or the other point of time in the post-colonial history. If you look at content errors, you have content errors in data on tribe, language, caste across the country. I'm not talking about the economic variable that will open an entirely different field of inquiry. And if you see large parts of India which do not have are not shown marked in this, it is primarily because most of my fieldwork has been in tribal societies. So I have not looked at very closely in the field there are in the scheduled caste data there. But if you do an analysis, so my understanding is that you'll find serious errors in the data on caste in UP, in Bihar, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Karnataka. Now, so if there are so many errors in the data, how do we use them? Actually, we don't note this, but in a lot of states, in crucial processes, we don't use the data, or we use a modified form of data. So I marked out all the states where data were not used as specified in the constitution in the last 50 years. So you see about 12 states have shaded here. So out of 30 plus states, about 12 states, they could not use the official statistics when they were delimiting the constituencies in 2002. Now, 12 out of 30 is not a small number. Right? Now, so what, I mean, the problems in data are in themselves not problematic if the census were explaining them. See, there can never be a perfect data set, right? So whenever you do a survey, there will be errors. But the problem arises because increasingly the Census of India is not explaining the errors itself. And this is partly because after 1991, we don't have access to administrative reports, we don't have access to the Director of Census Operations conferences. I mean, these were the platforms where the problems were discussed threadbare. They may not appear in the main statistical appendix, but if you go here, you get all concerns and doubts there. So increasingly, these reports are not being published, or they are published with very little substantive content. Now, you will say, well, possibly that this is a problem for us because we are outside the state, but those within will have access to all these, finer nuances. Unfortunately, because they are not preparing those reports in the first place, they themselves end up misunderstanding the data. The ORGI and Directors of Census Operations have over the last 20 years miscalculated the growth rate of states because they did not have access to the entire set of metadata. The Finance Commission and the Delimitation Commission have miscalculated shares of different parts of the state. The technical committees meant to arrive at population projections have arrived at wrong projections. This is because it is not that we as users don't have access to these detailed report, they themselves do not have access to it. I went to a Director of Census Operations office and I asked for the administrative report. Most of the junior staff hadn't heard of the administrative report. Every administrative report begins with this note that I'm writing this so that my successors don't face any problems, or they don't have to reinvent the wheel. But now successors don't have access to the administrative reports itself. So I will, illustrate these claims with the help of two cases. The first I call the demographic somersault of Nagaland. For over 4 decades, Nagaland reported high and increasing population growth rates. And then, in fact, the Chief Minister went on the record to say that the fact that our population is growing so fast is a testimony that we are doing well in the Indian Union. Now, then in 2011, suddenly the population contracted without any demographic transition. There was no increase in the conflict level. All standard explanations, demographic, non-demographic explanations of population change, they fail to account for this. So a friend forwarded the news link to me saying that the population of your favorite state has come down. So why don't you have a look at it? I said, because I was just out of EDR, where statistics have a sacrosanct position of sorts at times. So I said it'll take about a week or two for me to do the mathematics and get the numbers right. But I said, let me go to the state one, because I don't even know how it looks like. And when I landed in Dimapur and reached somebody's home at 7 o'clock in the night, he opened up a whole cabinet full of court case against this Census of India. And then I said, it will take much more than a week to even read these court case papers. right? And then I said, we as economists and other social scientists are not aware of much of these background noise in the whole thing. So I mean, it's a very complex case. I'll just share one particular statistic, I mean, image which will tell you what's happening. There has been a growth in the disparity in constituency sizes across the state. So once you see in 1976 you did the last delimitation, and for some reason which I don't understand, you decided that even the delimitation within states is going to be frozen. So therefore the constituency sizes has been growing and now because this is a state where geography and ethnicity are closely interlinked. A growing disparity means that a different community is gaining at the expense of somebody else. So that led to enormous tensions, and population was inflated in some places by 200% or something. After the 2011 election, when the election commission was forced to reduce the electorate, in a few constituencies, the electorate size went back to 1991 level. Imagine scale of this. Now, I will not go deeper into the Nagaland case, but take you to the Kashmir case and focus on that. So, Kashmir, in 2001, Kashmir accounted for almost half, if not more, of the districts with extremely high child sex ratios. Kashmir was not a state known for low child sex ratios. It was Punjab and Haryana. And then suddenly, and then the adjacent plains of Jammu, but the Kashmir Valley was not known for low sex ratios. Now, in 2011, suddenly, all districts of Kashmir Valley show a sharp decrease in their child sex ratio, and the decrease is so sharp that Kashmir becomes an outlier across India. Until now, it was one of the healthy states in terms of child sex ratios, and then it becomes a clear outlier. Now, so you're talking about something, and something interesting happened. It's not only the child sex ratio decreased, the child population share increased. Now, we know that in Punjab and Haryana, they have been very low child sex ratio, but that did not lead to increase in child population shares. And interestingly, there is a very, very high and close correlation between the increase in child population share and decrease in child sex ratio. When to Kashmir, the child sex ratio has even decreased in villages in Pakistan border, where it takes 8 hours to reach the nearest town. So they had no means of sex detection and sex selective abortion. So I said, how come, the population, and they said, we don't have any stigma against the birth of girl child because these are tribal communities. So you see a decrease across the districts. Now I'm just showing you another, graph from there. So you have Kashmir Valley, there's been a decrease in some district, 217 points decrease in the child sex ratio. Human populations don't change so fast, and Kashmir's districts are reasonably large. So I was wondering. Now, so if you see here, all districts of Kashmir are in one particular part of this graph. All of them. There's not one exception. Now, I looked at a variety of explanations, all kinds of splicing the data, combining them to see if there's some explanation, but it didn't. But I said, let me go back and start talking to politicians and activists, etc., journalists. And the first thing they said that 2001, the census has a problem, and because we could not conduct a clean census. But I said, but they published the data. They said, but on the field, we know that nobody could go out of their homes in 2001. It was such a very difficult year. So I started looking back at 2001 and went to Srinagar University and started reading all the old newspapers I could access. So something interesting emerged. In the year 2000, the government of India decided that it will reach out to the armed groups, campaigning for independence. Now, this was a welcome initiative when Bajpayee had this Eid ceasefire offer, etc. But this has this had an unintended impact on the Census of India. The Hurriyat conference felt threatened by the government's outreach to Hizbul Mujahideen, and that's set off competition between the two, and it was very acrimonious action between the two. And at one point of time, Hizbul Mujahideen said that the Hurriyat and others are not focusing on the real threat to the Muslim majority of Kashmir. They are traitors, etc., but we will not allow the census to happen. And they said, we are going to call for the boycott, and we will attack anybody associated with the census. So this happened, but something else also happened. When Bajpayee government sought the vote of trust, it lost by one vote, right? And Saifuddin Soz was from National Conference. He defied the party whip and voted against the party government. He was expelled from the government. He was expelled from the National Conference. He was trying to start a new party of his own. At that time, Mufti Muhammad Saeed was also trying to start a new party. So Saifuddin Soz latched onto this demographic thing. And because Saifuddin Soz was a university professor and somebody who has impeccable secular credentials, the fact that he also spoke about this after Hurriyat, it led, after the Hizbul Mujahideen, it gave more credence to the allegations. Now, in the middle of all this, the employees union said, why are you making us sacrificial lambs in your politics? On the first day of census, hardly any employee showed at the census office. Until the late evening of the eve, they were saying there's no problem, we hold it. On the first day, hardly anybody showed. And then about a week later, Ashok Jaitley, the chief secretary, stepped in and said, we have to get it done. Advani ji is very clear about it. It has to be done. So now you see, I'm talking about the center, Hurriyat, Hizb and Saifuddin, but where is the state government? The state government was squeezed between all of them and had no room to, play. Just as Hurriyat felt threatened by the state government, by the center's overtures to Hizbul Mujahideen, Farooq Abdullah also felt that he will be cornered in the process because he was not included in the peace talks. And at the same time, the center had introduced the Fifth Pay Commission. Now, Fifth Pay Commission meant that states' ability to finance development shrunk considerably. Farooq Saab had to face an election soon, and he had nothing to show. So then Farooq Saab entered the sectarian regional political game. So everybody was stoking the fire. Nobody had incentive to tamp down on them. And then he didn't have, and because he was not able to pay salaries on time, he did not have much of leeway with the state government employees either who were going to conduct the census. So you see, all this is happening, and then when they eventually started the census, they were given instructions that you should not wear the government badge while going out. Still, in many places, the Hizbul Mujahideen and Lashkar-e-Toiba attacked census officers. So all this happened before the census tables came out to us. Now, when the Excel table comes to us, we do not know all of this. So in 2001, it was that we will not allow the dilution of the Muslim majority composition of Kashmir Valley. So Mardum Shumari or Hai Shumari, which is either conduct the census or the plebiscite. 10 years later, it became Mardum Shumari for Rai Shumari. See, after the end of Cold War, most of the nationalist struggles degenerated into sub-nationalist struggles to control power. And the liberalization also meant that federal transfers could no longer keep Jammu Kashmir afloat the way they earlier. So the gap, so this led to the economic decline of Jammu Kashmir compared to other states. Now, in the middle of this, the armed and non-armed pro-independence groups said that we need to intervene in the census now. We need to conduct the census, but of course shape it according to our needs. So there was a call to Kashmiris and Muslim enumerators to fulfill their duty towards the community. There was a call to Muslims to get enumerated, and there was a call to non-Kashmiri speaking tribal Muslims to report themselves as Kashmiri speaking. Now, this led to a complication. The tribal communities, because after 1990, when they were recognized as scheduled tribes, they had been empowered with the last generation. So they said, no, we will report our mother tongue in the census. So all this happens and the actual counting happens after all this. Right. Now, so I would argue that when we as students are introduced to this neat life cycle of census, no interference at all. It's a smooth flow. But actually, if you see, there are administrative statistics provided by the state government, there are legal constraints, there are the courts, we look at census data, there are civil society people, the academia, the media, and all this can overwhelm the main statistical purpose of census. And in fact, if I just look at one particular keyword, publicity, the public outreach of census is one of the largest advertisement campaigns in India. It involves unprecedented, mobilization of state machinery. See, all government statistics, whether the census or national sample survey, are collected through a conversation. And a conversation requires an element of trust between the person who's asking, person who's responding. So this publicity outreach is one of the most critical moments in the entire exercise, where you build trust with people. Where you explain, why am I going to come to your house? A former, Assistant Registrar General of India in Kashmir was mistaken to be somebody who's come to steal children. So he said, we have to build trust with people, right? So therefore, now, but all this, so we as economists don't ask if the public outreach went well or not. Right? So I will argue that, and I'm going to conclude with this, is that statistics are not standalone images collected by a distant satellite. They are embedded flows of information. And so while we very well recognize the interlinkage between development and democracy deficit, the interlinkages between development and data deficit and development and the democracy deficit are not appreciated. So my work has been focused on trying to uncover these interlinkages and also trying to estimate the degree of error in this statistics because of this, and so that we can a much more informed conversation about data. So I'll conclude by saying that for me, statistics are public goods, they are collective self-portraits, they are communication devices. A tribal leader told me, I inflated my population because we want a new district for our community. So I have to do this. So this was his way of, because Sarkar sunti nahi hai, sir. So this was his way of, sending a message to Government of India that we need a district. Now, next census that the population contracted, he said, it's fine because you cannot take back the district from me. But he said, in 2021, if I need something else for which I need data, I will manipulate it again because I am answerable to my community, not to Government of India. Now, statistics are socially embedded flows. Information, statistics, symbols of modernity. Advani was deeply embarrassed that India could not cover the entire country. For him, it was a matter of pride that we have to cover the entire country. He said, buy, borrow, beg, steal, give me the census of the entire country. And because, in countries after another, political leaders and senior bureaucrats say that we have to hang our heads in shame when we go out of the country and we have to say that we have not been able to conduct a census. I mean, you are converting institutional failure into a moral sin. And this is not only the leaders, everyone whom I spoke to in Nagaland, he said, we have strayed from Christianity and that is why we falsified census. I said, no. In Kashmir, they said, we have strayed from Islam, that is why this happened. See, people transform institutional failures into moral sins, and this happens because we don't have a transparent conversation around this. Now, so as you know, Adam 2 says, statistics are an integral part of economic and social world which they are supposed to describe. So then data quality may not be amenable to stand-alone legal, administrative and technological interventions. If people who say that, if you introduce these handheld devices, so we'll be able to track everything and there'll be an improvement in data quality. In Pakistan, in the recently held census, they gave these handheld devices, and on the day of the census, they realized that nobody is going in a particular district. So when they asked them, they said that you have not paid me last 3 months salary, I don't have the TADA, and this is very far away, I don't have petrol for my vehicle. So you can give them handheld devices, you can give them all technology, but at the end of the day, human problems have to be solved through human intervention. So I'm going to stop here. Thanks a lot for the